Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are wrestling with a really big one. It's maybe the digital world's greatest conflict, this seemingly impossible goal of achieving verifiable, legally binding trust. You know, the kind you absolutely need for banking, voting, serious stuff.
With the high-stakes interactions.
Exactly. While also somehow guaranteeing absolute, completely untraceable anonymity for, well, everything else you do online.
Yeah, and that tension, it isn't just some, minor inconvenience, is it? It really defines the fragility of Web 2 as we know it.
Absolutely.
We've all felt it, that systemic loss of digital sovereignty, where every click, every registration, every scrap of data gets harvested, pulled into central databases, and used to build these profiles that often work against us.
Yeah, used against the user. It's become the norm.
And so our sources today, they really center on this thing called the Universal Integrated Identity Decoupled System, UIID for short.
UIID. Okay. And crucially, we should probably clarify who's behind this right at the start. We see mentions of Linkspreed, their Web4 API. Are we talking about a closed proprietary system here, or is Linkspreed building something meant to be, I don't know, more open?
That's a really important distinction to make early on. So Linkspreed is the technology architect, the foundational implementer of this UIE framework. But the key is it's designed as a decentralized open standard.
Okay, open standard. That's good to know.
They specifically engineered this system to reverse that loss of sovereignty we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The goal is restoring full control over identity, over personal data, back to you, the individual user. UID isn't positioned as just, a slightly better ID system. It's framed as the foundational tech for Web 4 itself.
Right, the foundation for the next web. So our mission today, then, is to really unpack the architecture that claims it can actually solve this paradox. The big question we're tackling is, how can an identity system enforce those really rigorous, legally binding systems? Know your customer KYC requirements, the ones needed for regulated services.
A necessary evil, some might say.
Right. And yet still grant absolute mathematically guaranteed anonymity for everything else. Your day-to-day online life. Getting that reconciliation right, that's the core focus of this deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this then. The UIID system. It's not just one digital ID. It's built on a two-tier identity structure. Why? Why is separating high-trust interactions from anonymous ones so absolutely necessary?
Well, think about it. A single identity for everything is. That's a single point of failure. It's a massive liability, frankly.
How so?
If you use the exact same ID to, say, post some controversial political opinion on a forum, and then you use that same ID to log into your investment portfolio.
Oh, yeah. I see where this is going.
Right. You risk real-world consequences, professional, financial, every single time you interact online. UID tackles this head-on by splitting the functionality. You get one single anchor of trust and then an unlimited supply of anonymous fields.
Okay, let's start with that anchor then, the UID core ID. If this is my digital passport, what makes it so robust? Why is it high stakes?
So the core ID is your single foundational digital identity. But, and this is key, its usage is highly restricted by design.
Restricted? How?
It's intended exclusively for those interactions demanding the absolute highest levels of trust, security, and crucially legal certainty. Think high-value financial transactions, securing a loan maybe, entering into a legally binding contract online, cross-border trade, even things like e-government services, digital voting perhaps.
Stuff where you really need to know who you're dealing with.
Exactly. These activities demand accountability. They demand legal certainty that some random anonymous profile just cannot provide.
And this core ID, this is where that necessary burden, the KYC requirement, comes in. This feels like the part where people usually get nervous, right? Concerns about centralized data storage, privacy invasion.
And that's totally understandable based on the Web 2 model we're used to.
Yeah.
But here, the rigor of KYC is framed differently. It's presented as a functional choice.
A functional choice? How?
The core ID requires a mandatory, rigorous, one-time KYC verification when you first set it up. This process is what firmly links your cryptographic ID to your real-world legal identity. It fulfills all those global regulatory compliance needs, AML, CFT, you name it.
Anti-money laundering, counter-financing of terrorism.
Yeah,
the serious stuff.
Right. But the crucial difference here, according to the sources, is that this is the only moment your personally identifiable information, your PII, is verified. And immediately after that verification, that sensitive data is cryptographically decoupled and secured. We'll definitely get into how that works later.
Okay, decoupled and secured. That's important. So once I've gone through that one-time process, establish this verified anchor, What's the big long-term benefit? Because, the whole promise of Web4 is supposed to be owning your digital life, not being trapped again.
Right. The primary long-term benefit, the big payoff, is something called existential portability.
Existential portability. Sounds profound.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
It's really the economic driver behind UID. Think about Web2 right now. Your reputation, your verified certifications, your account history, it's all locked onto Facebook or LinkedIn or Google, right?
Yeah, totally siloed.
And if one of those platforms decides, for whatever reason, to terminate your account, you lose potentially decades of accumulated history, verification, reputation. It's just gone.
Ugh, yeah, that's a scary thought.
With UID, the core ID ensures that your verified credentials, proof of employment, educational degrees, maybe a high user rating on a platform, are cryptographically linked to you, the individual, not the platform.
So I own my reputation data.
Exactly. And you can carry it seamlessly across all platforms, any service that supports UID. It completely eliminates vendor lock-in. You own your verified status. The platform just becomes a temporary place where you use it.
Wow, okay. That fundamentally shifts the power dynamic, doesn't it? From the platform owning your history to you owning it.
Completely.
All right, now let's pivot to the other tier. The one where, let's be honest, we probably spend 99% of our time online. The anonymity layer. These are the UID aliases.
Right. These are the cryptographic shields of anonymity. So if the core ID is your passport only really used at the border crossing, so to speak.
The high trust moment.
Exactly. Then the aliases are your unlimited supply of unique digital masks. You use them for navigating everyday online life. They're designed for all those routine, lower stakes activities. And the fact that you have an unlimited supply is absolutely key to defeating the modern tracking machine.
Okay, unlimited supply. How does just having lots of them protect me against, the really sophisticated tracking and profiling, stuff that even VPNs or incognito modes sometimes struggle with?
Well, they act as this powerful, multi-layered defense. They work against both corporate and state-level cross-site tracking. Think about how current data brokers operate. They rely on linking your behavior, your usage patterns across different websites. They use persistent identifiers, your IP address, browser fingerprinting, behavioral markers.
All that creepy background stuff.
All that creepy stuff. If you use the same identity or even just a couple of identities everywhere, they can build a single, incredibly robust and frankly, frighteningly comprehensive profile of you.
Yeah.
UID forces segmentation. You're encouraged, really enabled, to use a completely separate, unique digital identity, a new alias for basically every different service, or maybe even every different context within a service.
Ah, okay. This is where those specific examples really help make it concrete. It's not just like one alias for social media and another for shopping. We're talking much more granular, right? Micro-segmentation.
Exactly that. The sources give good examples. Like, you dedicate one alias just for a specific gaming community. Maybe it's one known for, competitive banter, anonymous trash talk, whatever. You use a second completely distinct alias just for an e-commerce platform, one that maybe needs your delivery address, but nothing else about you. And then a third totally separate alias for a professional forum where you're sharing industry insights and want to maintain a certain persona.
So my gaming persona can't be linked to my professional one or my shopping habits?
Precisely. The power of that segmentation is that those activities remain completely siloed from an external perspective. Your, let's say, anonymous, maybe aggressive gaming habits cannot be mathematically linked to your thoughtful professional insights, nor can either be linked to what you buy online. Your overall cohesive digital self remains obscured, hidden behind these mathematically distinct shields.
Okay, and this gets us to the core privacy promise, the real aha moment, I think, for privacy folks. The source material is super explicit on this point. It says, no mathematical link exists allowing external parties to trace an alias back to the core ID. Or even, and this is important too, link two different aliases back to the same core ID.
That cryptographic separation it's the bedrock of the entire system's privacy claim. It means your trusted identity, the core ID, and all your anonymous identities, the aliases, are functionally, mathematically, totally decoupled from an outside view.
So what does a service provider actually see when I use an alias?
They only ever see the public key of that specific alias, which, on its own, is functionally useless for linkage or tracing back to you or any other alias you might use. The only way to prove a link back to the core ID is through a very specific, user-authorized, probably time-limited, zero-knowledge proof process. And crucially, the details of that proof process aren't visible to the external party requesting it.
Wow, okay, so that separation guarantees anonymity for everyday use, provided the crypto holds up.
That's the promise. Guaranteed anonymity, mathematically enforced. Now, if we shift focus back a bit, but look at it functionally, we really need to emphasize again, KYC within this UIID architecture isn't presented as just some regulatory burden you have to grudgingly endure.
Right, you said it was a functional choice.
Exactly. It's positioned as a functional choice that deliberately elevates the core ID to the level of trust required for, let's call it, civilized, regulated digital commerce and interaction.
Okay, so why is that stringent one-time verification so vital? Why does it justify even the temporary exposure of my PII during setup? You mentioned legal certainty, economic stability.
It absolutely boils down to that. That verification step establishes a confirmed non-fraudulent link to a real-world legal entity, a person, a company. And that link is just paramount for high-value regulated services.
Give me some more examples.
Okay, think about international trade agreements settled digitally. Think about governance in decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, where real value is at stake. Or imagine securing a mortgage entirely online without ever meeting someone face-to-face.
Yeah, you need to know who's on the other side.
You have to know that the participant is a real, legally accountable entity capable of actually upholding their end of the agreement. This linkage is non-negotiable if we want to properly integrate the digital world with the existing legal and financial systems of the physical world.
Makes sense. And without that legal certainty, that anchor to the real world, the whole system becomes vulnerable to, well, massive systemic threats. The sources briefly mentioned Sybil attacks, but that seems like a really critical point to expand on. Preventing that kind of abuse must be a primary justification for the whole core ID structure.
Oh, absolutely. Sybil attacks are a huge problem in decentralized systems. For listeners who aren't familiar, a Sybil attack is when a single malicious actor creates potentially millions of fake, seemingly independent identities.
To what end? Why create millions of fakes?
To gain disproportionate influence or control. We see this threat constantly in things like DAO governance, where voting power might be based on tokens or identity, or in early-stage crypto projects doing token distributions or NFT whitelists, trying to get fair distribution to real users.
So one person could pretend to be 1,000 people and grab all the tokens or sway a crucial vote.
Exactly. They can skew market prices, hijack governance decisions entirely, drain resources meant for a broad community. It undermines the entire principle of decentralized fairness.
So how does UIID's approach actually solve this in practice? Is it just theoretical or a genuine solution?
The claim is it's the only viable non-custodial solution. By tethering that core ID, the single anchor of trust, to that rigorous one-time KYC verification.
Verifying one real human per core ID.
Precisely. You ensure that every entity participating in a system that requires verification is an actual unique human being or a legitimate legal corporation. This provides that crucial one user, one vote, or one user, one identity assurance needed for fair governance, fair resource distribution, things like that.
But crucially, after that initial KYC.
Right, and this is important. Once that uniqueness is proven via the core ID, the user then operates anonymously using their aliases for all subsequent interactions within that system or any other system. So you achieve the necessary accountability, the Sybil resistance, without sacrificing ongoing day-to-day privacy.
Right.
The system mitigates the abuse without resorting to perpetual surveillance.
Okay, that balance is key. Accountability where needed, anonymity elsewhere. Now here's where, for me, it gets really interesting, because the system is designed to immediately neutralize the privacy risk that comes with handling that KYC data in the first place.
Yeah.
Once the KYC is done, the claim is the system immediately and permanently delinks the sensitive PII, the personally identifiable information, your name, address, etc., from the active digital identity, the core ID itself.
Correct. That's the cryptographic leap.
And this is achieved not by magic, but through 3 integrated components that work together to create this, well, this ironclad bridge between the verified world and the anonymous world. Okay, we have to start with the core cryptographic innovation here. Zero-knowledge signatures, or ZKS. The definition sounds elegant proof without disclosure. But for the listener, let's try and go a bit deeper. What does this mean? Maybe not mathematically, but functionally.
Okay, functionally, ZKS is the central engine driving UIE's privacy. It allows one party, usually your alias, acting on behalf of your core ID, to convince another party, say a website or service provider, that a specific statement about your core ID is true.
Like, is this person over 18?
Exactly. Without revealing any of the underlying information used to prove it. So no date of birth is shared. In the UID context, ZKS acts as the cryptographic mortar. It links the anonymous alias to the verified core ID, but only through a mathematical proof, not by actually sharing the core ID's data.
Okay, let's break down that process a bit more. How does an alias use ZKS to prove something about the hidden core ID? What are the steps involved, roughly?
Roughly, there are usually 3 key phases. First, there's a kind of commitment phase. Your end, specifically your identity vault, which holds the core ID data, creates a cryptographic commitment based on that data. Think of it like putting the answer in a mathematically sealed envelope and sending it over. Okay.
Sealed envelope sent.
Second, the challenge phase. The verifier, the service wanting the proof, sends back a random, unpredictable cryptographic challenge, like asking a specific, complex question about what's inside the sealed envelope.
A unique question each time.
Ideally, yes. Third, the response phase. Your identity vault uses the original commitment, the secret data from your core ID and its private keys to generate a mathematical proof, the zero-knowledge signature that correctly answers the verifier's specific challenge. This signature mathematically confirms the truth of the statement. Yes, the data inside proves this person is over 18, without the verifier ever needing to actually open the PII envelope.
That still feels a little abstract. Let's use that detailed age verification example from the sources. A website needs to confirm I'm over 18 for legal reasons. Normally, I'd have to upload ID or give my date of birth. How does ZKS handle this without sharing my PII?
Okay, so the website sends a request to your currently active alias.
Right.
Proof of age greater than 18 required. Your identity vault on your device holds your verified date of birth. That's the sensitive PII linked to your core ID.
Right.
The ZKS algorithm inside your vault performs a local computation. Is the date of birth associated with this core ID more than 18 years in the past? It calculates the answer, which is simply yes or no. Let's say it's yes.
Okay, calculation done locally.
Then it uses the ZKS mechanism, that commitment, challenge, response dance, to generate a cryptographic signature. This signature irrefutably proves the truth of that yes statement.
And crucially, what does the website, the verifier, actually receive and see?
The website receives 2 things. First, the necessary attribute confirmation, a mathematically robust proof that this specific alias is cryptographically linked to a core ID that has been verified as being over 18 years old. Second, they likely also get a high confidence score, assuring them that the underlying core ID is legitimate and hasn't been flagged for fraud.
And what don't they receive?
They receive 0 sensitive PII. No name, no exact birth date, no address, nothing that could be used to personally identify or track you from that interaction alone. The trust is established solely on the cryptographic proof, not on sharing data. This fundamentally changes the game for high-trust interactions online.
Okay, that's powerful. ZKS proves facts about data without revealing the data, but that sensitive data, like my verified date of birth, still has to exist somewhere and needs to be stored extremely securely. Which leads us to the second critical component, the identity vault, described as the user's personal security fortress.
Yeah, and that fortress metaphor is pretty accurate. The identity vault is really the cornerstone of the digital sovereignty claim, because it directly addresses the single biggest systemic risk we see in Web 2, these huge centralized honeypots of user data that are constantly under attack.
Right. So what's the core security promise here regarding centralization? Where does my data actually live?
The promise is absolute non-centralization and complete user control. That sensitive PII collected during the one-time KYC, the private keys for your core ID and all your generated aliases, any verified digital credentials you accumulate, none of it, absolutely none of it, is ever stored on Linkspreed central servers or any other third-party central servers for that matter. The whole architecture aims to make the very concept of a central identity database obsolete.
Okay, if it's not centralized, where does all this critical, super-sensitive data live? And what keeps it safe on my end?
All of it resides exclusively in a secure, heavily encrypted identity vault that lives on your own device, your phone, your computer, maybe a dedicated hardware device eventually.
Just encrypted on my hard drive? That still feels a bit vulnerable if my device gets compromised.
No, it's more than just simple file encryption. For the highest level of security, the sources suggest the vault leverages advanced on-device security measures, things like integration with hardware security modules, HSMs, or trusted execution environments, TEs.
Okay, Ts and HSMs. Can you briefly explain what those are?
Sure. Think of them as secure, isolated areas within modern processors, like a little vault inside the chip itself. They ensure that critical cryptographic operations like signing transactions or generating ZKS proofs using your private keys happen safely inside this protected zone, even if the main operating system of your phone or computer gets infected with malware.
Okay. So the private key, the really secret sauce, ideally never even leaves that secure chip on my device.
That's the gold standard, yes. It ensures you retain full physical control over the keys. But, and this is the crucial point you raised earlier implicitly, this setup user control, keys on device, raises the absolutely critical question. What happens if I lose my phone? Or my laptop dies? Do I lose my vault, all my keys, my entire digital identity? How is key recovery handled if there's no central forgot my password button to click? And that right there is the necessary, unavoidable trade-off for achieving true sovereignty. When you, the user, take full control, you also take on the full responsibility for managing that control, including key management and recovery.
So no safety net from Linkspreed if I mess up.
Fundamentally, no. The architecture requires users to implement robust, likely decentralized, key recovery methods themselves. This often involves techniques like Shamir's secret sharing, where your key is split into multiple shards.
Like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly. And you might distribute these encrypted shards across multiple trusted hardware devices you own, maybe store one with a trusted family member, or perhaps use specialized fiduciary services that act as custodians for shards but can't reconstruct the key on their own. The system enables recovery, but it forces the user to manage that recovery using decentralized means. This ensures no single entity, especially not the platform provider like Linkspreed, can unilaterally restore, access, or seize your identity. It really reinforces that commitment to non-custodial ownership.
Okay, it puts the onus on the user but protects against central control or failure. Got it. Now, the third mechanism mentioned, the decentralized ledger technology, DLT, or blockchain. It sounds like UID uses blockchain, but in a very specific, almost minimalist way.
It's extremely minimalist, yes. UID uses the DLT, the blockchain component, solely as a secure public notary register. Its function is deliberately restricted purely for integrity and status checking. Think of a traditional bank. It has two main jobs: custody, holding your money, and notarizing, recording your transactions. UID only uses the DLT part for the notarizing function related to the ID's existence and status.
Okay, so what exactly gets recorded on this public ledger then? If it's public, isn't that a privacy risk?
That's the key data minimization for privacy. The only things recorded on the ledger are, 1, the cryptographic hash. Think of it as a unique, irreversible fingerprint of the ID, both core ID and potentially aliases, though the details might vary. And 2, its current status. Is it active? Has it been revoked? Maybe due to compromise or user request, is it suspended?
Why record the status publicly?
It's essential for trust and security in the ecosystem. For instance, it prevents a bad actor whose core ID gets revoked for fraud from just continuing to use associated aliases. Or it allows the service to quickly verify that an alias being presented corresponds to a core ID that is currently valid and active, not one that's been compromised and revoked. It confirms the ID's current validity.
Okay, so just to hammer this home, because blockchain often triggers privacy alarms, let's reiterate that crucial safeguard: 0 PII on the ledger.
Absolutely 0. The cryptographic hash is a one-way function. You can hash the ID data to get the fingerprint, but you absolutely cannot reverse the hash to find out the user's name, address, date of birth, or any other sensitive PII from the ledger itself. An external party can look up a hash on the DLT, confirm its status as active, which guarantees its validity within the UIID system, but they learn nothing personal about the individual behind it.
So the DLT serves purely as this robust, transparent trust mechanism for ID status, not as a tracking or surveillance tool.
Exactly. It's a notary, not a directory. Okay, so if we connect all these pieces, the two tiers, the ZKS bridge linking them, the secure identity vault on the user's device, the minimalist DLT, if we connect that robust technical architecture to the bigger picture, the system-wide benefits start to look pretty radical. They restructure how we interact with technology online, starting by potentially eliminating, our oldest and probably biggest source of digital pain and vulnerability.
Please say passwords.
Passwords.
Yes, that would be a massive win right there. I mean, most people juggle dozens, maybe hundreds of passwords. They forget them, reset them constantly. We're all tired of complicated multi-factor authentication, MFA. And fundamentally, passwords are the main way hackers get in, right? Through phishing, data breaches.
And they absolutely are. They are static secrets, things you know. And things you know can be guessed, phished, socially engineered, or stolen wholesale from breached databases. UID aims to eliminate passwords entirely. It replaces them with a much more robust, dynamic, cryptographic challenge-response transaction system.
Yeah, challenge response, how does that work?
It relies on those asymmetric public-private key pairs we talked about, stored securely in your identity vault, ideally protected by the TEE or HSM.
Right, the keys that never leave my device.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So instead of you typing a static password, here's how it works. You want to log into a service. The service sends a unique, unpredictable, often time-limited cryptographic challenge to your device.
Like a random string of data?
Sort of, yeah. Your device, specifically the identity vault, using your inaccessible private key inside that secure TE or HSM, then performs a cryptographic signing operation on that unique challenge. It produces a unique digital signature or response that is mathematically linked to the challenge and your private key. This response is sent back to the service.
And the service can verify that signature using my public key.
Precisely. The service uses your public key, which is safe to share, to verify that the signature could only have been created by the corresponding private key and that it correctly answers the specific challenge they sent. It proves you possess the private key without you ever revealing the key itself.
Okay, explain how that stops phishing. If a hacker tricks me into visiting a fake login page that looks identical to my bank's website.
Good question. In a traditional phishing attack, you type your username and password those static secrets into the fake site. The hacker captures them, and bam, they have your credentials maybe forever.
Right.
With challenger response, the fake site might try to initiate the process. It might even forward a real challenge from the bank to your device. Your device signs that specific challenge and sends the response back. The fake site captures the response. But here's the key. That response is only valid for the single unique challenge that was issued for that specific login attempt.
Ah, so the hacker can't reuse that intercepted response later.
Exactly. It's useless for any other login attempt because the next time, the real service will issue a completely different challenge. Since the private key never left your secure vault and the response was unique to that moment in that challenge, the system is virtually impervious to traditional phishing and also man-in-the-middle attacks where someone tries to intercept communication. There is simply no static secret for the hacker to steal or guess. The verification relies entirely on the cryptographic proof of possessing the private key at that moment.
Okay, that is a massive step up. Truly passwordless and much more resistant to common attacks than even current MFA methods like SMS codes, which can be intercepted.
Significantly more resistant, yes.
All right, moving beyond just security, let's circle back and re-emphasize existential portability and why it's so foundational for this whole Web4 concept. You mentioned the economic risk of vendor lock-in earlier. Can you elaborate a bit more on the actual economic value UIID potentially unlocks for the average user here?
Yeah, the economic value really lies in transforming your verified status and reputation into a kind of transferable personal capital. Think about it today. If you have an excellent credit score built up over years with one bureau, it's not always easy or seamless to use that reputation globally or with newer, maybe decentralized financial services.
True. Or your work history on LinkedIn.
Exactly. If you build up a massive, verified work history, endorsements, recommendations on LinkedIn, that data, that reputation is owned and controlled by LinkedIn. It's siloed there. UIID aims to anchor that history, those verified credentials, directly to your core ID.
So how would that work in practice? Let's say I want to apply for a loan from a new decentralized finance DeFi platform.
Okay. Instead of uploading tax documents, bank statements, employment letters, sharing loads of sensitive PII, you would instead provide a zero-knowledge proof. Your identity vault would generate a ZKS proof confirming that your core ID possesses certain verified financial attributes, like income range verified by a trusted source, and perhaps a reputation score above a certain threshold, maybe based on past loan repayments tracked via verifiable credentials linked to your core ID.
And the DeFi platform gets the proof they need.
That you meet their criteria with high confidence without you having to expose the underlying sensitive data. And that verified status is instantly accessible and usable across any compatible service anywhere in the world, theoretically.
So this means users aren't just safer online, they're also potentially much more efficient. They can skip the endless friction of having to constantly re-verify who they are or rebuild their reputation from scratch every single time they try a new service or platform.
Correct. And critically, it eliminates that existential platform risk. The platform can no longer hold your hard-earned reputation hostage. Meaning, if a platform you use starts implementing policies you really dislike, or raises its fees exorbitantly, or gets acquired by a company you don't trust, you can, in theory, seamlessly migrate. You take your core ID, all your associated verified credentials, your entire reputation-proof history, and move to a competing service without losing years, maybe decades, of accrued digital standing.
That forces platforms to actually compete on service quality and user experience rather than just relying on locking users in through data moats.
Precisely. They have to become competitive service providers rather than data landlords. It fundamentally changes the market dynamics in favor of the user.
Okay. Now let's look at this from the other side. What about the people building the apps and services for this new Web4 world? The sources talk about a huge incentive for developers integrating with Linkspreed's ecosystem, this concept of zero liability for PII. Given today's regulatory climate, GDPR, CCPA, all the global privacy laws, the financial and legal burden of just holding user data is massive and, frankly, terrifying for many companies.
Oh, it's potentially a game changer for builders, developers, entrepreneurs. UIID is positioned as the secure, decentralized identity foundation for Linkspreed's broader Web4 API. And because the core design principle is that identity control, private keys, and sensitive PII storage rest entirely with the user via their identity vault, and verification often happens via ZKS.
The developer never touches the raw PII.
In many cases, no. Or only transiently during initial verification, perhaps, depending on the exact flow. But fundamentally, developers who build on top of UII and integrate it correctly are legally and financially freed from the immense liability, the insurance costs, the compliance burden associated with securely handling and protecting huge databases of sensitive user identity data.
Okay, let me push back on zero liability just a bit. That sounds almost too good to be true. Let's say a developer builds a financial service using UIID, and maybe there's a critical bug in their specific integration of the UIID API. Perhaps they mishandle the ZKS proof verification, maybe allowing a non-verified user to access something they shouldn't have. And as a result, another user suffers a financial loss. Is that developer really 100% off the hook legally and financially? Or is zero liability more about shedding the burden of PII storage specifically?
That is a really important clarification, you're right. Zero liability is probably shorthand. It dramatically minimizes liability, but maybe doesn't eliminate all forms of it. The liability for data custodianship, the massive risk associated with storing databases full of names, addresses, dates of birth, private keys. That liability is effectively shifted back to the user because the data resides in their vault. The developer service is no longer a centralized Fort Knox waiting to be breached for PII.
Okay, so they're not liable for a mass breach of stored PII because they don't store it.
Correct. However, developers absolutely remain liable for the integrity and security of their own service logic and their correct implementation of the UIID Web4 API protocols. If their code is buggy, if they fail to properly validate the ZKS proof presented by an alias, or if their service logic itself introduces vulnerabilities, then yes, the operational liability for damages caused by their faulty implementation would still rest with them.
Got it. So it removes the giant systemic risk and cost of PII storage, which is arguably the biggest headache and expense for many online services today.
Exactly. It removes the lion's share of modern digital security costs and compliance burdens related to identity data. And that practical benefit is still immense.
Yeah, I can see that. Developers can focus their resources on actually building innovative features and user experiences, knowing that the foundational layer, user identity authentication, credential verification, is handled robustly and in a decentralized way that minimizes their risk profile.
Precisely. The sources mention things like developers using UIID for modules like social networks as a service, SNOS. This would allow them to quickly integrate sophisticated social functions, user authentication, reputation systems, and secure interactions into their apps without needing to build, manage, secure, and legally defend massive, expensive, target-rich identity and authentication infrastructure themselves. That freedom could dramatically accelerate innovation while shifting the cost and responsibility for core identity security back to the sovereign user, where the actual control now lies. #tag outro.
Okay, so wrapping this up. What does this all mean for you, the listener, trying to navigate this complex digital world? Hopefully, you now have a much clearer picture of how this UID system proposes to reconcile what seemed like opposites: verifiable trust and absolute anonymity. The claim is they're successfully bridged by technologies like zero-knowledge signatures. The architecture relies on that fundamental core ID alias split. Your core ID acts as the anchor for trust, established via that rigorous one-time KYC verification, which is framed as necessary for accountability in high-stakes situations. And then you have the unlimited aliases, providing mathematically enforced untraceable anonymity for pretty much everything else you do online.
And critically, Those identities and the keys that control them are kept separate and secured on your own hardware, inside the identity vault. The goal is to make your identity a highly trusted entity when needed, but instantly protected and anonymous the rest of the time.
It really seems like the UID system, as described, is fundamentally about restructuring the digital power dynamic.
I think that's the core argument, yes. By implementing this two-tier structure, by ensuring that verified status and reputation become existentially portable, owned by you, not the platform, this kind of system could create an environment where platforms genuinely have to compete for user loyalty and engagement based on merit.
Rather than just relying on locking users in through data control and network effects.
Exactly. That initial KYC step, often seen as a hurdle, is positioned here as the necessary, intentional, upfront compromise that enables the ultimate, potentially radical freedom of near absolute anonymity within the resulting ecosystem.
That definitely raises a final provocative thought for everyone listening to mull over. If individuals truly become the sovereign owners of their digital identity, their verified credentials, their online reputation, their interaction history, what happens then to the massive advertising empires, the data brokering industries, all the Web2 giants built entirely on the premise of centralizing that data and controlling user access?
Yeah, what happens when the raw material they mine your data and identity is no longer theirs for the taking?
It suggests a profound shift, moving away from what some call a surveillance economy towards maybe an economy of verified, self-owned digital capital.
The game could certainly be changing.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Universal Integrated Identity Decoupled system. We really hope you feel much better informed now about how Web4 architects are attempting to solve that fundamental trust versus anonymity paradox.